Okay, we can't talk about imperialism without talking about how certain presidents, things they did within our imperialistic power. So we're going to talk about Roosevelt and Wilson primarily with this video. Okay, so Roosevelt, he gets his rise to power in the 1900 election. President McKinley defeats William Jennings Bryan by a wide margin. Okay, so he's reelected. And, well, McKinley had Roosevelt as his vice president. Well, on September 6, 1901, Leon Zlagso shot President McKinley, who dies a few days later. So, thus, Theodore Roosevelt becomes the youngest person to become president in the United States at this time. Roosevelt believed the United States had a duty to shape the less civilized parts of the world. So, he wanted the United States to become a world power. Okay, so let's start with American diplomacy in Asia. So in 1899, the United States was a major power in Asia. It had become one. Now, between 1895 and 1900, American exports to China had quadrupled. In 1894, war began between China and Japan over what is now the Korean Peninsula. This ended in a Japanese victory at this time period. In the peace treaty, China gave Korea independence and Japan territory in Manchuria, which is a part of China. This is important because it all leads up to it has to do with World War II as well. Okay, so the war showed that China was weaker than people had thought and that Japan had successfully adopted Western technology. Japan's rising power worried the Russians. So Russia forced Japan to give back that part of Manchuria to China and later made China lease the territory to Russia. Leasing the territory meant it would still belong to China, but a foreign power would have control. Okay, this leasehold became the center of a sphere of influence, which was an area where a foreign nation controlled economic development such as railroads and minings at this time. McKinley and Secretary of State John Hay supported an open-door policy in China. Okay, they believed all countries should be allowed to trade with China, not just one group. Okay. Hay sent notes to countries with leaseholds in China asking to keep ports open to all nations. Hay expected all powers would abide by this plan. Secret Chinese societies were organized to try to end this foreign control. And members of the Boxers started what was called the Boxer Rebellion. You had a group of members invaded foreign embassies in Beijing and killed more than 200 foreigners and took others prisoners. An international force stopped the rebellion in August of 1900. Theodore Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906 for his efforts in ending the war in a war between Japan and Russia. Japan is called the Russo-Japanese War. Okay. After the peace treaty between Japan and Russia, relations between the United States and Japan worsened. They're not very good. Okay. Each nation wanted greater influence in Asia. So they agreed to respect each other's territorial possessions and to uphold the open door policy and to support China's independence. So we developed what was called the Great White Fleet. We built this. It's 16 battleships of the United States Navy was sent around the world to show our country's military strength. This is part of our naval buildup here. Visiting Japan did not help the tension that already existed. Okay, so we move on to our presence in the Caribbean. So in 1901, the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty, signed by U.S. and Great Britain, gave the United States exclusive rights to build and control any proposed canal through Central America. A French company that had begun to build a canal through Panama offered to sell its rights and property in Panama to the United States. In 1903, Panama was still part of Colombia, which refused John Hay's offer to purchase the land and gain rights to build the canal. Panamanians decided to declare their independence from Colombia and make their own deal with the United States to build the canal. The short uprising against Colombia was supported by the United States, which sent ships to Panama to prevent Colombia from interfering. The United States recognized the Panamanian independence, and the two nations signed a treaty to have the canal built. Construction of the 50-mile canal took almost 10 years to do. But the big thing is it shortened the distance from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean by about 8,000 nautical miles. So now you don't have to go sail all the way around the end of South America to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. You go down to Panama, cut through the Panama Canal, and you come up. Okay, good. So, in 1904, the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine stated that the United States would intervene in Latin American economic and political affairs when necessary to help maintain stability in the Western Hemisphere. The corollary was first applied to the Dominican Republic when it fell behind in debt payments to European nations. Latin American nations resented the growing influence of America in their spheres. The new president of the United States, William Howard Taft, he continued Roosevelt's policies. He believed that if American business leaders supported Latin American development, everyone would benefit. So his policy came to be called dollar diplomacy. Okay, Woodrow Wilson's diplomacy. President Wilson, he was opposed to imperialism and believed democracy was necessary to keep the nation stable and prosperous. He wanted a world free from revolution and war. So in 1911, there was a revolution in Mexico that forced its leader, Porfirio Diaz, to flee the country. The new leader, Francisco Madero, he was a poor administrator there, and so General Victorino Huerta took over in Mexico and presumably had Madero murdered. Wilson refused to recognize the new government and prevented weapons from reaching Huerta. In 1914, Wilson sent U.S. Marines to seize the Mexican port of Veracruz to overthrow Huerta, which set off anti-American riots throughout Mexico. International mediation of the dispute placed Venustiano Carranza as Mexico's new president. Okay, so Mexican forces opposed to Carranza conducted raids into the United States, hoping Wilson would intervene. Okay, these were led by Pancho Villa. He led a group of guerrillas, which was an armed group that carries out surprise attacks into New Mexico, and this led to a number of Americans being killed. Wilson sent General John J. Pershing and his troops into Mexico to capture Villa. Pershing was unsuccessful, but Wilson's Mexican policy damaged U.S. foreign relations. Okay, that concludes our third video on American imperialism, and thus we'll end basically what we will talk about with American imperialism, because after this we start leading into World War I and the events of that. Okay, pay close attention because Germany actually tries to play off our issues with Mexico at the time to get Mexico to fight in the war against us. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to do your Edmodo quiz, and it's worth 2 points. And I will talk to you about this at a later date. Thank you.